Oh, some cookies. Have some cookies. Give some cookies to your children. Why don't you give them some arsenic? How about some cyanide at the same time?
This is the Kevin Trudeau Show.
I am exposing the corruption in government and in major multinational corporations. We're telling you the things that they don't want you to know that will make your life better.
There are three main causes of scarred arteries. The first one is homogenized dairy products. That means milk, cream, cottage cheese, ice cream, yogurt, butter, cheese. If the milk has been homogenized, it's going to cause scarring of the artery. Why? Way back, a long time ago, there used to be a milkman. And the milkman used to come every day and make deliveries. And the reason is he would pick up milk that was freshly squeezed. Squeeze milk? Brian, what do you call that? Brian knows. He used to work on a farm. Milk the cow. You milk the cow. You don't squeeze. Okay, well, all right. So the milk that has been milked, the milk that has been milked, the cow that has been milked delivers milk fresh in the morning. And then the milkman would pick it up. It would be in glass bottles, and he would come and he would put it out in the milk box outside your house, and it was kind of cold. Hey, there's the milkman there. See the milkman? Yeah, there was a lot of children born, and the milkman were always suspect because the wives were home alone while the guy was at work, and a lot of kids in that neighborhood look sometimes like the milkman. Depends on the milkman and the wives, I suppose. But anyways, we used to have a milkman. But the reason you had a milkman is the milk was milked, squeezed in the morning, and it was delivered. And if you remember, the cream separated from the milk. So you had this glass bottle of milk, and the cream would float to the top, and then there'd be milk in the bottom. So you had to shake it up. Because it was broken up, the reason it was broken up is because the molecule sizes were all different. And once the milk got exposed to air, it began to oxidize, which means break down. And after about 48 hours, the milk went sour because it got rotten. It got spoiled. That's why you had to have a milkman. He would make milk deliveries usually 2 or 3 times a week. So you always had fresh, good tasting, not sour, not spoiled milk. The milk producer said, what can we do to make milk so it doesn't go bad very quickly? In other words, what can we do so that when we get the milk out of the cow, we can put it in a container, send it to a grocery store, and it can sit there for 3 weeks and never get sour and not go rancid and not get spoiled. It's called increasing the shelf life. Because we can make a lot more money. We don't have to employ the milkmen. We can have our products just in the grocery store. What can we do? And so this great scientist said, well, the reason the milk goes sour is because the large clusters of molecules begin to break down, and that turns it rancid. So since there are 2 basic sized molecules, the cream molecule and the milk molecule, one is heavier or larger and lighter than the other. That's why it floats. That's why the cream would float. If we break all the molecules down, if we break down the molecules in the cream and break down the molecules in the milk and make them really small so they're all the same size. Homo means the same. Homogeneous. If we can make them homogeneous, homo being the same, if we make the molecules homogeneous or all the same size, then there's nothing to break down. If they get exposed to air, it's not going to break down the molecules because we already broke it down first. Therefore, it won't spoil. It should have a longer shelf life. So they came up with a process called homogenization. Again, homogenization, starting with the word homo for the same. So homogenization is the process of making all the molecules homo or the same size. And that's why you can buy milk in the store, and that's why it can last 3 weeks when back then it couldn't. The problem with homogenization is when you break down those molecules, that's not what nature intended you to consume. Nature intended you to consume the goat milk, the buffalo milk, the cow milk, as it is. And your body then breaks down the molecules. When the molecules are already broken down into these very small itty-bitty molecules, it creates something called xanthine oxidates, which are like little knives. So when you put some cream in your coffee, when you eat a piece of cheese, if you get a hamburger with cheese on it, if you have some cottage cheese, if you have some yogurt, if you have some buttermilk, if you have some butter, all of that has come from milk that has been homogenized. You are putting these knives in your system. And guess what these little knives, these xanthine oxidates do? They scar your artery. That's why if you go back, before homogenization, you had much lower heart disease, much lower blockages. Nobody had the problem because their arteries weren't getting scarred. So what is the solution? The solution, I'm going to give you a couple solutions, but the first solution is ideally you buy milk that is not homogenized. Now I happen to buy a milk, I think it's called Kalata, K-A-L-O something. Maybe you can find that. It's a non-homogenized milk. They happen to sell it here. Throughout the United States and throughout the world, it's generally difficult to find milk that is not homogenized. And the milk that I buy, there it is, that's what I buy. Organic, cream top whole milk, because it's not homogenized. So the cream will actually be at the top. So when I open it up, I actually have to take a knife and like push down the cream, and then I have to shake it up, and sometimes the cream stays in clumps. So it takes a little while for the first round to get the cream integrated with the milk. And then I use the milk, whether I'm cooking or baking, and people at the house sometimes like that in their coffee or tea. Sometimes they have some other things that they use it for. But that's like making a protein shake or something like that. So that's what we use. So the number one thing is if you're going to buy dairy products, and that particular brand also has half and half. They have cream, they have whipping cream, they have cottage cheese, and it all is from non-homogenized dairy product. That's 100% organic. That's another story, but that doesn't have anything to do with the heart disease or the cholesterol. It's the homogenization, which is the most important thing when you're talking about scarring arteries. So number one, stay away from dairy products that have been homogenized. And it's pretty much impossible, quite frankly, because if you're going to go out to a restaurant, you're stuck. You're going to get a hamburger, a cheeseburger, you're stuck. So you kind of do the best you can. Don't be that fanatical about it, but ideally stay away from any type of homogenized dairy product. So that's a brand that I use, and I can get cottage cheese, I can get yogurt, I can get butter from that company. So if you get butter non-homogenized from milk that has not been homogenized, and ideally from grass-fed cows, because that has also a better component, so it's going to be better for your heart. When it comes to cheese, the key word you look for is raw. So it's raw cheese or cheese from raw milk. Raw, if it uses the word raw, it means two things. It's not homogenized and it hasn't been pasteurized. So that's beautiful. And for those of you who live in Europe, in France, in Switzerland, most of the cheeses there are raw. In America, you're screwed because America has the worst food on the planet. And that's why we have the most illness and disease per capita than any other country in the world. And that's why people take more drugs in America than all the other countries in the world combined per capita. It's not even close. So raw cheese, non-homogenized dairy. So that's number one. Kevin, what else scars the arteries? You said there were 3 things. Thank you for asking. The second thing that scars the arteries is trans fats, sometimes called hydrogenated oil. Now, this is the best part. This didn't exist 50, 60 years ago. Back in the 20s and 30s, there was no such thing as trans fats. But there was a couple guys, one by the name of Kraft, who started a little company called Kraft in America. And he invented Kraft American cheese, which really isn't cheese. He actually had to pay Congress to allow him to call it cheese because it's not cheese. It's oil. It's mostly oil. And what he did is he came up with oil, and he came up with a process where he spins the oil down and breaks it down into these tiny molecules, very similar to the homogenization process they use for milk. But he did this with oil. So this way the oil wouldn't go rancid, and it was also homogeneous and would create a texture that was smooth and silky. Thus, American cheese, when you melt it, it's very silky, or Velveeta is very silky. These are some of the 2 biggest poisons you can put in your body and will give you heart disease. Please have some more. We need to take you out of the gene pool, okay? Eat some more. Please, have another helping. Hurry up. I want to see the heart attack in action. So, hydrogenated oil, unfortunately, is in everything. Peanut butter. Your children. You are killing your children. You're making them obese, and you're screwing up their hormones. Hydrogenated oil has all these type of negative effects, but let's just talk about the heart. The hydrogenated oil or trans fat scars the artery, just like the xanthine oxidates in homogenized milk. Scars the artery. So if you go and you look at your salad dressing, look at your peanut butter, look at everything, you're looking for the words hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil. Depending on what country you live in, the label may also say trans fats someplace, like what percentage of trans fats or how many grams of trans fats are in it. Trans fats, hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil, it's killing you. It's giving you heart disease. It's setting you up for stroke. Does this say trans fat? There you go. Partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. What lovely product is this, by the way? Is this like a cracker or something?
It's a serving of cookies.
Oh, some cookies. Have some cookies. Give some cookies to your children. Why don't you give them some arsenic? How about some cyanide at the same time? You wonderful parents. Hey, I'm only saying this out of love because you are ignorant right now. You're a little naive, but mostly you're ignorant. You're not stupid. You are smart and intelligent because you're watching this show. You would not be watching this show if you were stupid, if you were a moron. But you're watching this show, you might be a little ignorant on some things, just as I am. By the way, somebody always says, Kevin, you make fun of it. Who's the biggest ignoramus amongst us? I will claim that title. That means I am ignorant probably of more things because I know that I don't know what I don't know. So I absolutely am always saying, what does that mean? What is that? I never heard that before because I understand I am ignorant about a lot of things. Doesn't offend me. I'm proud of the fact that I don't know what I don't know. And I take full ownership of that in a good, positive way. So trans fats are killing you. They're in virtually all of your food in America and around the world. Now, here's the funny part about it. Years ago, there was a company called McDonald's. And McDonald's had arguably the best tasting French fries you could buy. Because Ray Kroc made sure the French fries, I believe, came from Idaho. And he had a real specific breed of potato. and he had a real specific way of cutting the potato, the exact size. He was fanatical. And this way of freezing the potato. It was a certain method so that when he would put that frozen potato in oil, it would crisp up beautifully, and the inside would taste good and be perfect texture, and the outside would be crisp, and it was like a perfect French fry. It was the best tasting French fry according to people. Do you know what he cooked the French fries in? What the oil was? Do you guys know? Brian, do you know? No, you don't know, right? Okay. Beef fat. Beef fat, which is an outstanding oil to fry in, just as duck fat is. Because they have a high flash point, which means you can crank up the heat. It's not going to smoke. It doesn't go rancid. It doesn't burn. And it gives it in parts, whatever you're frying, whether it's fried chicken, you use beef fat or duck fat for fried chicken, or you use duck fat or beef fat. Those are the two most tastiest ones for French fries. It's going to taste delicious. But there was this idiotic, and these people were stupid. They said, oh, these are the same people who said, don't use paper bags, use plastic bags because we want to save the environment. Don't use paper because you're going to cut down the trees. Use plastic so that we can ruin the oceans because plastic that breaks down. Anyway, so these same idiots said, don't use beef fat because that's an animal product. Oh my God, we don't want that. That has saturated fat. Saturated fat's bad for you. And I said, why? Why is saturated fat bad? Because it is. Well, what does it do? Because it's bad. You don't want that. And the guys who were pushing that had hydrogenated oil ready to sell them. So they got everybody suckered into believing that saturated fat's bad. So McDonald's, in order to succumb to this media barrage of propaganda and lies, they switched from the healthy, delicious tasting beef fat to unhealthy, trans fat laden vegetable oil from genetically modified Monsanto produced oils. So now when you have your French fries and all your fast food joints, none of them use beef fat anymore. They all use trans fat laden, hydrogenated, partially hydrogenated, genetically modified oil that all goes rancid anyway. And when you eat it, you are just clogging up your arteries, and it doesn't even taste any good. So stay away from trans fats. What's the third thing that's blocking your artery? Chlorinated water. Chlorine. Back during the Vietnam War, there were 17-year-old kids who were given M16s. They were not allowed to drink alcohol because they weren't old enough, because they weren't responsible enough to drink alcohol. But they were given an M16 and told, kill human beings. You're old enough to kill other human beings, but we'll throw you in prison if you have a beer. That's another story. So these 17-year-old kids went over to Vietnam, and they had canteens. And the water over there was hard to come by, so a soldier might have to go into a river or a lake and get some water. And if they drank it, they may get dysentery, they could pick up some viruses or bacterial infections. It could be a big problem. So they were given chlorine tablets because the chlorine does a good job of killing all virus and bacteria and making the water relatively safe to drink. You're not going to die immediately from dysentery, and you're not going to pick up some parasite and that could kill you or just make your life miserable because you'll be shitting your pants all the time and throwing up and getting a fever and all this other stuff. So these soldiers, 17 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old, would put the chlorine tablets in the water, and they were told, you put the chlorine tablets in everything you drink just in case. So 6-8 months, these kids would put chlorine tablets in their water and drink the water. They didn't get dysentery, they didn't get an infection, they didn't get a parasite, so that was good. Unfortunately, many of them got killed, and they were shipped home, and many of them were autopsied. When they were autopsied, the surgeons were amazed to find 70 and 80% blockages in the arteries in their heart. This is within 6 or 7 months, my friends. 6 or 7 months of putting chlorine in the water created that much blockage because the chlorine was put in a water tablet, was put in the canteen. They just drank it. It didn't get a chance to evaporate or burn off. So they were putting a lot of chlorine in their body. That chlorine scars the artery. And then the wonderful LDL is doing its great job by patching it. But then every day they're scarring it again. They're scarring it again. They're scarring it again. They're scarring it again with the chlorine. And the LDL just keeps patching it and the artery just gets all clogged up. So here's how this is affecting you. Tap water. Now, putting chlorine in city water, in municipal water supplies, is really a smart, good thing because it does kill all the bacteria and viruses and parasites. So that's great. But the problem is you don't want to consume it. So before you consume it, you want to take it out. So this is why in your home, you don't want to be drinking tap water unless you have a whole house water filtration system that gets the chlorine out. Some people have a reverse osmosis filter that gets the water out. I prefer spring water, which is why I don't drink any of the water in my house, even though I still have a whole house filtration system with an ultraviolet light and granular activated charcoal impregnated with silver and a post and pre-filter. So I have all the water to go through all this filter. So there's no chlorine anyway, but I prefer spring water, which is no chlorine in natural spring water. So you need to have either drink spring water only, which is why when I go to a restaurant, I always say, do you have bottled still water or bottled flat water, depending on where you live in the world. Bottled spring water. No ice. I don't want the ice because the ice comes out of their ice machine. It's loaded with chlorine. Next. Oh, by the way, I say this, and then I see this person who I explain this to. I'm at their house. I go, yeah, I have spring water. Then they're going to make some coffee, and they use tap water. I go, wait a minute. Why aren't you using the spring water for the coffee? Well, it's coffee. The chlorine's still in it. So if you're making soup, tea, or coffee, don't use tap water. You're still putting it in your body just because it's been colored with coffee. It's still got chlorine in it. Plus your coffee's going to taste better. So don't drink tap water, restaurants, or anywhere. Here's the other problem. If you buy something at the store and it has a liquid, let's say you buy some spaghetti sauce at the store in a jar, they put water in it, and they're putting water with chlorine in it. And let's say you're buying a soup. Let's say you go to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or a coffee shop and get a coffee. It's got chlorine in it. Okay, you can't be perfect. I get it. I get that. And you can't be fanatical. I get that. And I'm not fanatical. I just do the best I can. So stay away from ingesting any water that's from a municipality because it has chlorine in it. But there's something else that most people don't realize. The largest organ in the body is the skin. Whatever you put on the skin is going to be absorbed into the skin. So that means if you take a bath, if you go in a hot tub, if you go in a swimming pool, if you go in a steam room, if you take a shower, the water which hits your skin is absorbed into your skin. If that water has chlorine in it, you are filling your body with chlorine and clogging your arteries. Which means if you go in your hot tub, or if you go in the swimming pool at your gym or health club, and you can smell the chlorine, they have to put it in. And thank God they do, because otherwise germs are going to be passed between people. Which is why if you have a home, you want to use either a salt water swimming pool without chlorine, or I had a freshwater pool. Number one, I filled the pool after it came out of my house through my filter, so there was no chlorine in it. And then my filtration system I had installed had ozone and oxygen. So it pumped ozone and oxygen into the water 24/7. That killed any virus or bacteria, kept the water sparkling clean. And when you jumped in, you're basically, instead of putting chlorine into your body, you're filling your body with oxygen. So it was actually therapeutic and healthy, almost like getting into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Okay, a little expensive, but hey, I'm just giving you all the options here. So those are the three things. Okay, but here's the most important one. I called up and I looked for a Harvard-trained cardiologist, a top doctor, top guy, heart surgeon, trained at Harvard Medical School, cardiologist, world famous, good. I go in and I said, I want to get a CAT scan on my heart with contrast, and I want an ultrasound on my heart, and I also want a full body vascular test. And he said, why? What symptoms are you having? Are you having chest pains or anything? I said, no, I'm not having any symptoms. He goes, well, insurance is not going to cover that. I said, hold on a minute. Oh, ow, oh, man, I'm having a hard time breathing. And I get all these chest pains. And I got this numbness down my left arm. And he just smiled at me going, he punches it into the computer, goes, insurance will now cover it. That's a joke, by the way. My insurance company, if you're watching, this is a complete joke. This is called a radio bit. This thing never happened. This is completely a made-up story. Just realized that. Anyway, so I told the doctor, I said, look, I want these things because unless you look, you don't know. He goes, well, I ran your cholesterol numbers. They're at 225. You want to be at 220, so I'm going to prescribe Lipitor. Of course he would. I said, why? He said, because you want to reduce your cholesterol so you don't get blockages. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do I have any blockages? And he says, well, I don't know. I said, why don't we look by doing a CAT scan with contrast, an ultrasound, and a vascular test? I said, because at my age, if I don't have any blockages now, then in the next 10 years or 20 years, I'm not going to get any blockages either. And he just looked at me like, that's true. I said, but you don't do that, do you? You never, ever call for a CAT scan with contrast, an ultrasound, and a vascular test on a patient. All you do is a cholesterol test. And the only time you'll do those tests is when the guy comes in and he has symptoms. When he has chest pains, when he has a hard time breathing, or if he has numbness or tingling down his left arm. That's true. I says, isn't that stupid? I says, you know, I have a car. I bring my car into the dealership and I say, I want a tune-up and I want everything checked. I want you to check the brakes. I want you to check all the fluids. I want to check all the bearings, check the tire pressure, check everything in my car, every single thing to make sure everything is at perfect optimal levels. And if it isn't, then we'll discuss whether I want to put a new one in now or wait. I bring my car in when it's running perfect. I don't wait for my car to break down and then bring it in, because at that point it could be too late. I like to prevent. My body is the same way. I say, look at my arteries now, because if my arteries are 60% open after all these years of living, I'm not going to change anything, and I'm not going to be taking any cholesterol-reducing dumb medication. It doesn't make any logical sense. So he ran all the tests, and he said, well, he said, your circulation is perfect. It's like an 18-year-old. You have de minimis calcification or blockages in your arteries. He goes, that's like a teenager. And your ultrasound, everything is working absolutely perfect. Your resting heart rate is like an athlete. Your blood pressure is perfect. He goes, but I'm still going to recommend you take the cholesterol-reducing drug because you're at 225. I said, I can't believe you just said that. And he just smiled. And he goes, I'm putting in my notes that I told you and gave you that recommendation because I have to. I said, I get it. I get it. It's sad. It's sad, but I get it. Hi, I'm Kevin Trudeau. This is everything they don't want you to know about to improve the quality of your life. Broadcasting every Monday and Wednesday, 2 days a week now. Monday and Wednesday at 1 o'clock Chicago time. Make sure you tune in and subscribe to the channel and share these shows with everyone you know.